negative ads' role right now is much more how they influence journalists than it is how they influence the public. Basically, 95% of the American public knows who they're going to vote for. They're either going to vote for or against the Democrat or for or against the Republican. I mean, that's very set. There's a very small number of people open for grabs. But what is open is the narrative of the campaign. What's going to shape the conversation that's going to allow those people undecided to move to one or the other? Is the campaign going to be about change? Is it going to be about, the economy and the fact that Hillary Clinton can do a better job, or will it be about the international scene with terrorism? And that'll be a big part of the negative ads will shape that, because journalists love to cover negative ads. Positive ads tend to be pretty boring. You find out that somebody supports educated children. You find out that they support clean water, that they want, the government to tax less and spend less. I mean, everybody agrees on all of those broad kinds of things. Negativity has much more interest, and so the negative ads can shape the narrative and get journalists to cover the campaigns in ways that some candidates may not like, but other candidates may, and that'll be where the real action is. Usually nomination battles tend not to have super negative ads, because you have Democrats competing against Democrats for the support of fellow Democrats, so that the role of negativity is very different than in the general election, where you have two partisans going at each other for the support of their respective partisans. So negativity plays a different role, but the amount of attacks that we're seeing are certainly elevated. And they're elevated not just by the super PACs, but by the candidates' ads themselves, much more so than we've seen in the past. We saw some of it in 2012 with Romney and Gingrich, but we're seeing even more of it now. And it's not just tied to the super PACs. I think it gets back to the fact that the Republicans have serious disagreements. And those disagreements are leading to very harsh kinds of attacks that are going on between Cruz and Rubio, or between Bush and Kasich, or whoever it happens to be. On the Democratic side, you don't see it quite as much. I mean, Sanders and Clinton have their differences, but Sanders is keeping the gloves on for the most part. I mean, he's being somewhat hard-hitting, but he's not, issuing classic kinds of attack ads that you see with more frequency on the Republican side. Lots of money is being spent, and it's being spent by a small number of people, and it is worrisome. However, money doesn't drive the process very effectively. I think that its role in the presidential election is not great. People's preferences are pretty well set. I think where it matters is going to be congressional races and Senate races, and then lower legislative races, and that's where the big effect is going to see. And the so-called dark money can make a big difference in those races, because people don't have very well set preferences. On the presidential front, it probably doesn't matter quite as much. Just look at Jeb Bush. I mean, he's got a huge amount of money, just been given another $10 million for a super PAC, and he's still languishing in the polls. So, the relationship between money and presidential success is not a super high one, but when you get to lower levels, it begins to have a lot of effect. I wouldn't pay much attention to the national polls right now, depending on the candidate, but Hillary Clinton may have a narrow lead. What I really want to pay attention to is the state of the economy. If the economy just added 292,000 jobs in December, if that were to happen over the next 6 to 8 months, 250,000 plus jobs, that's very good news for Hillary Clinton. And so what we really want to know is where the economy stands, and that's going to shape the kind of campaign that the candidates can run. If the economy begins to go soft and jobs dry up, that's going to be a big problem for the incumbent party. So that's where I would pay attention to. Polling right now is all over the map, and it's hard to be sure who's exactly going to vote, and the polls themselves are struggling a little bit in measuring the horse race. I mean, the Gallup poll isn't even going to do their tracking polls, and that's part and parcel of the problem. So I would pay attention to the polls in the particular primary states that are about to come up, but other than that, I'd be focused much more on the economy. And you can be sure that Hillary Clinton looks at the Dow Jones and GDP growth and stuff like that with some frequency.